Hello students, welcome to BYJU'S classes. On the 10th of September, Congress party along with many other political parties called for Bharat Bandh. The reason that was given by these particular political parties was that the present government of India has miserably failed in controlling the petrol as well as the diesel prices. As a result of this, the common man is under a lot of financial stress. In this particular video, we'll have a discussion related to the various facets related to the increase in the petrol and diesel prices. The points of discussion in this particular video will be: 1. We will start with what is the connection between India as well as the crude oil. Second, we will try to evaluate what are the reasons why the crude oil prices have increased. To be more precise, the causes that have led to increase in the domestic prices of petrol as well as diesel. And if the prices have increased, what is the impact or the concerns related to this particular increase in the prices? Then we will have a look at the criticism against the government. I will not only discuss the criticism, I will also give you some of the supporting points which have been laid down by the government of India. And finally, we will have a look at what is the way forward. So let me start with the first, the crude oil as well as India. India is the third largest consumer of a crude oil in the international market. The top two consumers are USA and China. Although India consumes a huge amount of a crude oil, domestic production capacity is very low. It is said that more than 80% of India's requirement India actually imports from rest of the world. And some of the countries which are very important in terms of exporting crude oil into India are Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Venezuela, etc. Especially Iran is an important ally here. Why? Iran was the third largest exporter of a crude oil into India. It is said that more than 60% of this particular requirement India imports from OPEC. And out of this particular 80%, 10% actually was exported from Iran into India. Now with US sanctions coming into place, this particular route will become very difficult. Hence, India will find it very difficult to import crude oil from Iran. But what is the impact of that? We will have a look at it later. But essentially, the point here is, although India is one of the largest consumers of the crude oil, the domestic production capacity is very small, whereas refining capacity is very huge. What do you mean by refining capacity? Crude oil will consist of various components such as naphtha, petrol, diesel, kerosene, so on and so forth. Each of these particular components will be separated. India imports a huge amount of a crude oil, refines it, and some of it actually exports it to rest of the world. India exports a petrol to around 15 countries and diesel to around 29 countries at a very lower prices. But essentially, here the point is, India imports a huge amount of a crude oil. Apart from this, some of the other important points are, the government has deregulated the fuel prices. The government deregulated aviation turbine fuel in the year 2002, has deregulated petrol in the year 2010, has deregulated diesel in the year 2014. Now, what do you mean by deregulation? Earlier, Government of India used to provide subsidies for the oil marketing companies under a concept called as APM, Administered Pricing Mechanism. Under this particular concept, the government used to regulate the prices of these particular commodities in the domestic market, whatever be the prices of these in the international market. But over a period of time, the Government of India has deregulated. In simple terms, it means that the market situation will determine these particular prices. And from 2016 and 2017, the Government of India has basically said that the petrol as well as the diesel prices will be determined on daily basis. That is, every day morning 6 a.m. as per the international prices, the prices of the petrol as well as the diesel will be adjusted in the Indian market. Apart from this, the components of crude oil have been divided under various heads. Some of these will be covered under GST, some of these will not be covered under GST. since the crude as well as petrol and diesel are there in the newspaper, next year the UPSC may start focusing on which of the components are under the ambit of GST, which are not under the ambit of GST. As of now, some of the components which are under the ambit of GST are LPG, naphtha, furnace oil, light diesel. And some of the components which are out of the ambit of GST are crude oil, high speed diesel, petrol, which is also referred as motor spirit, natural gas, and aviation turbine fuel. Very recently in the newspapers you must have read that the GST Council is discussing whether should we bring aviation turbine fuel as well as a natural gas under the ambit of GST. And because of the present discussion that is happening on petrol and diesel, there is also a discussion that petrol as well as diesel should be brought under the ambit of GST as well. Now, what will happen because of this? Whether the prices will reduce or increase or remain the same, we'll have a look at it in the later part of the discussion. But right now, these are some of the basics. And finally, as the government of India subsidizes various commodities as well as services for the beneficiaries or the households in the domestic market, the government of India subsidizes kerosene as well as LPG. That is, not all the components of a crude oil are determined by the market fluctuation. The prices of kerosene as well as LPG are subsidized by government of India. And in the recently concluded budget for the financial year 2019, government of India has set aside around 25,000 crore rupees to subsidize LPG as well as kerosene. Now, what is the impact of the crude oil prices on this subsidy amount? We'll have a look at it later. So, these are some of the very basic points that you're supposed to know before you understand a very dynamic concept of petrol as well as diesel prices. So, now let me show you how the petrol as well as diesel prices are determined in the domestic market. First step will be the crude oil will be imported into India. The prices of the crude will be determined by international market prices. Apart from the international market prices, the transportation charges will be imposed. And finally, the OMCs, oil marketing companies, will pay something called as a landed price. Now, the crude oil barrel has landed into Indian territory. Once this particular crude oil barrel has landed, it will be refined into various components. Petrol and diesel will be two very important components out of this particular crude oil barrel. To these particular petrol and diesel prices or landed prices, the OMCs will add margins. Once they add margins, the central government will also impose excise duty. Along with this, two more charges that will be get added will be one, the dealer margin, that is the petrol bunks, how much charges they will add. And apart from this, one very important charge that will be added will be the state VAT. Now, please understand the difference here. One, the central government, when it imposes excise duties, it will impose per liter. I'll repeat it. The central government, when it imposes the excise duties, it will impose per liter. Whereas, the state government will impose VAT, which is also referred to as ad valorem. Now, what is the difference between these two charges? Whatever could be the price of the petrol and diesel, the central government will collect a fixed amount per liter. Whereas, since the state government has imposed ad valorem tax, it simply means if the price of the petrol increases, the taxes which are collected by the state government will also increase. Let me give you an example. Let's imagine hypothetically, price of petrol here is 100 rupees. Again, hypothetical numbers, price of petrol is 100 rupees per liter. If the central government says, I am going to collect 10 rupees as excise duties, the price of petrol might increase it to 150 rupees or may fall down to 50 rupees. The central government will collect a fixed charge of or will impose a fixed charge of 10 rupees. Whereas, if the state government imposes a ad valorem tax or a VAT of 10%, it means higher the price, higher will be the taxes collected by the state government. When it is 100 rupees, state governments will collect 10 rupees. When it increases to 150 rupees, state governments will collect 15 rupees. And when it falls to 80 rupees, state governments will collect 8 rupees. That is the precise reason the central government has basically said it will not be varying or it will not be decreasing the excise duty and has asked various states government to look into it. And whenever 1 liter of a petrol or diesel is sold in the retail market, the breakup of price will have these constituents. This is the representation for petrol and this will be the representation for diesel. You can see that the state taxes as well as central taxes comprise a huge amount or a huge chunk out of the market prices of petrol as well as diesel. If I forego the dealers commission in both the cases, whatever is the price of the petrol as well as the diesel will be almost similar to the taxes imposed by the central government as well as the state government. It is said that if the dealers commission is foregone, the taxes which are collected in case of petrol by both center as well as state are equivalent to the price of the petrol. That is a precise reason you will have come across this particular statement where they will say the taxes in case of petrol are 100%. Whereas in case of diesel, the taxes which are collected by the state as well as central government are around 67% of the price of diesel. So these are some of the very important points that you need to understand in case of a pricing of petrol as well as diesel. Now, what are the reasons? What are the causes why the market prices of petrol and diesel have kept on increasing? You must have heard to the speech or the interview of the finance minister where he basically said that none of the domestic factors are actually influencing the price of petrol and diesel. The factors which are actually affecting the prices of petrol and diesel are external in nature. Let's try and understand what are these particular factors and how they are affecting the domestic prices of petrol and diesel. Now let's have a look at what are the causes or the reasons because of which the crude oil prices have increased in the international market, as a result of which the petrol as well as diesel prices have increased in the domestic market. As already mentioned, India imports more than 80% of its requirement of a crude oil from the international market. Hence, any small variation or any change in any of the factors which are affecting the price of the crude oil will also affect the import basket for India in terms of whether the prices will increase or the import bill will decrease. The finance minister very recently has stated that the volatility in terms of a pricing of petrol and diesel are not domestic driven, rather these are externally driven. That is, external factors are leading to increase in the petrol as well as diesel prices. Now let's have a look at these particular issues or these particular reasons. The first two are basically leading to reduction in the crude oil supply to the international market. First one is variation in supply, that is OPEC being one of the major contributors of international crude oil supply, in recent times has said that they will be curtailing the production as well as the supply to the international market. And when the supply becomes lesser, obviously the prices of these particular commodities will start increasing in the international market. Added to this, the sanctions of US over Iran have come into effect. As a result of this, the supply of the crude oil from Iran to international market also has reduced. Basically, these two reasons have led to reduction in supply of crude oil in the market, as a result of which the prices have increased. Third, dollar has got stronger. Because of various reasons, in the last couple of months we have seen that the dollar is becoming stronger against various currencies. Indian currency is not an outlier. The rupee has depreciated, so are the currencies of the emerging market economies. And whenever rupee becomes depreciated or rupee depreciates, the imports will become costlier, and since 80% of the requirement are in the form of imports, the crude oil becomes costlier, leading to increase in the domestic market price of petrol as well as diesel. Since India is heavily dependent on the imports because of various other reasons such as current account deficit, trade deficit, the trade wars, currency wars, the protectionism which is being imposed by US over various imports into their country. Because of all of these reasons, and most importantly, the federal tapering which is being done by the Fed Reserve of USA. The rupee is getting depreciated, and as a result of this, the import of the crude has become costlier. Let's try and understand what is the impact of this particular increase in the fuel prices. First one, the current account deficit is going to widen. Already the current account deficit has breached 2% of GDP, and by this year end, that is the financial year 2019, it is said that it is going to go beyond even 2.6% of GDP. This will not only affect the rupee value, this will also affect the forex reserves held by RBI. Already RBI has stated that the forex reserves, which were around $426 billion, which is all-time high in case of India, have already declined to being around $400 billion. So higher the current account deficit, because of a higher trade deficit, this is going to affect not only the rupee value, this will also affect the forex reserves. Second, since the crude oil prices have increased, the petrol and diesel prices will also increase in the domestic market. And since petrol and diesel prices will increase, this will affect the domestic inflation rate. For the month of July, the inflation rate, that is CPI, was 4.17%, which is already higher than the 4% target which has been given to RBI under Monetary Policy Framework Agreement. Now, in the last couple of years, it has been seen that the fuel prices as well as the food prices are the main contributing factors for inflation rate in case of India. With higher fuel prices, it will again fuel inflation. And if the inflation is fueled, already rupee is depreciating, then RBI may simply front load another increase in the interest rate. That is, RBI may simply increase the policy rates by another notch, let's say 25 basis points, or in extreme cases by 50 basis points to contain inflation rate as well as to contain depreciation of rupee. What is the impact of this? If the interest rates are increased by RBI, basically this makes loans costlier, or the cost of capital will increase in the domestic market. And if the loans become costlier or dearer, the industrial growth will also get affected. So apart from this affecting industrial growth, the industrial growth will also get affected in another way. That is, for industries, one of the very important raw material is fuel, that is petrol as well as diesel. And with increase in the fuel prices, this will have an impact in cost of production for the industries, which will make an impact, or which will limit the industrial growth parameters in India. It will have an impact on the finances of the government, because Government of India subsidizes the kerosene as well as LPG, and when the international crude oil prices will increase, the prices of kerosene as well as LPG will also increase. But on the other hand, the Government of India cannot increase these particular prices. Why? The households in the market, that is households in the Indian market, are very price sensitive, and this being an election year, the government usually doesn't increase these particular prices. As a result of this, the subsidy burden of the Government of India will increase. Already various experts have stated that the 25,000 crore rupees that has been set aside by Government of India to subsidize kerosene as well as LPG may fall short. And when the subsidies will increase, the fiscal deficit target of 3.3%, which has to be achieved by Government of India for the financial year 2019, will also come under pressure. This happens on one side, and on the other side, since the interest rates have increased in the domestic market, the Government of India will find it difficult to borrow from the market at the same interest rates. In simple terms, the cost of borrowing for the Government of India will also increase. All of this will basically put a lot of pressure on the fiscal deficit target of Government of India. So in this way, there will be an impact on the finances of the government with increase in the international crude oil prices. Next, this will have an impact on the households. Why? The households will consume petrol or diesel for their transportation needs, and whenever the prices of petrol and diesel have increased, the cost of transportation of various commodities or various goods or vegetables in the market have increased, which indirectly will make it costlier for the domestic households to consume these particular commodities. In simple terms, the expenditure of households are going to increase because of the price increase in the domestic prices of the petrol as well as diesel. Next, now all of these factors will definitely have an impact on the growth. Why? Look at this, the CAD has increased, trade deficit has increased, rupee is depreciating, The crude oil prices have increased, petrol and diesel prices have increased, interest rates have increased, fiscal deficit is higher. Obviously, all these factors will have a limiting effect on the growth. The problem with this particular situation is that Indian economy is in the recovery phase and very recently has become the fastest growing economy in the whole world. Now, because of this particular price increase in the international market for crude, this will have a limiting effect on the growth prospects of our Indian economy. Finally, the present government of India may end up paying a huge political cost because of higher petrol and diesel prices in the domestic market. For a simple reason, the households in India are considered to be very price sensitive. And since these are very price sensitive, they may not understand when the finance minister says that this is because of the external factors and not because of the domestic factors. They will simply blame the government of India, and already the Congress party as well as other opposition parties have made a big fuss out of this particular increase of petrol as well as diesel prices in the domestic market. For example, the Congress party has stated that when they were in the power in the year 2014, the petrol price in Delhi was somewhere in the range of 52 rupees, and today it has breached around 80 rupees. Now, the Congress party says this represents the failure of the present government of India. But having said so, if the prices are adjusted for inflation rate, the price differential will not be very huge. But the common man doesn't understand this. The common man basically says this is the fault of the government of India. So basically these are the issues or the impact or the effects of increase in the domestic prices of petrol as well as diesel. So what has been the criticism against the handling of this particular issue by government? The experts have stated that the government in the last couple of years, that is between 2014 to 2018, has kept on increasing excise duties on petrol as well as diesel, despite the international crude oil prices declining. The government of India in the last 4 years has actually increased the excise duties on both petrol and diesel 9 times, whereas only once the excise duties on both of them have been reduced. The government of India says that this was done keeping in mind the fiscal prudence measure that they wanted to achieve. That is, the target was to generate revenues by imposing huge amount of excise duties, collect it, bridge the fiscal deficit. And to a very great extent, the government of India has been very successful. But the argument is this: government of India collected huge amount of revenues by increasing excise duties when the international crude oil prices were reducing, rather than transferring all the benefit to the consumers in the domestic market. And now when the prices are actually increasing, the government of India doesn't want to control or regulate the prices, and now it says the market will decide the pricing of this particular petrol as well as diesel. And second criticism has been that India exports POL. POL stands for petroleum oil lubricants. As already mentioned, refining capacity in case of India is very high. As a result of this, part of the imports that we do, we also export in the form of refined components. India exports petrol to around 15 countries. That is, in 2018 we have exported petrol at above price of 32 rupees or price above 32 rupees to 15 countries. And we have exported diesel to 29 countries in this particular year alone at a price above 32 rupees. So the argument is, when the domestic market price is inching towards 80 and in some of the cities has already crossed 80 rupees, why are we exporting at cheaper prices to the international market? The third criticism is, what about the prices in the neighboring countries? Look at the prices of petrol as well as diesel in Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Pakistan. These are much lower than what has been the price of petrol as well as diesel in the Indian market. Although these prices are not representing the present prices, these prices are higher than what are the domestic prices in all the neighboring countries. So these have been the criticism against the handling of this particular issue by government of India. Having said so, the government of India has clarified that 1. Taxes are just one of the factors which are affecting the domestic prices of this particular petrol as well as diesel. The most important factors or the factors which are presently affecting petrol as well as diesel prices in the market are external in nature, as already mentioned or discussed by me in the previous section. The international crude oil prices are increasing, the volatility is very high in the international market, The trade wars are going on, currency wars are going on, rupee is depreciating because of a federal tapering which is happening in USA. All are these external factors which are contributing to the increase in the crude oil prices or the import basket of crude oil prices into India. That is one statement which has been given by government. Second, look at the situation of oil marketing companies. Earlier, oil marketing companies were issued with oil bonds. That is basically the government of India, rather than paying directly subsidy, used to issue long-term or long tenure oil bonds to these OMCs. And the OMCs used to suffer under recoveries because of this. The government of India now says, since the prices of the crude oil in the international market declined, I have allowed the OMCs to earn or garner more revenues. As a result of this, today the financial situation of the OMCs is much better than what it was in the year 2014. Third, yes, no doubt the government of India has raised a huge amount of revenues because of an increase in the excise duties. It is said that the excise duties earned by the government of India between 2013 to 2017 and 18 increased from 0.4% of GDP to 1.4% of GDP. So 1% of GDP extra revenues were earned by the government of India during this particular period. Yes, no doubt the government of India has earned the revenues, but the government of India says these are not the revenues that has come to us. These are the revenues which we have used to provide subsidies, to provide welfare schemes, to provide electricity, to provide capitalization, so on and so forth. Fourth, yes, exports of petrol and diesel are somewhere above the range of 32 rupees from India to the international market. But government of India says that these exports will not be taxed in India. Why? The exports are promoted by government of India. Since you want to promote exports, there is no logical rationalization to impose taxes in India. These exports will be taxed by the importing country, and the consumers in those countries obviously will end up paying higher prices than what price at which we are exporting. And finally, the government of India says that we have ensured that the revenues that we have generated will be used for fiscal prudence measures. That is, we were worried about revenue deficit, we were worried about fiscal deficit. We wanted to ensure quality of expenditure is going to increase. And in fact, the government of India has been able to achieve these particular objectives. For example, the fiscal deficit between these 2 years came down from 4.5% to 3.5%. Revenue deficit is much lesser today, and the government of India has increased the capital expenditure as well as the quality of expenditure in various infrastructure projects. So basically these are the points which are given by government of India to quell this particular argument that the government of India has mishandled this particular situation. Another very important argument which has been raised by various critics is that although government of India has clarified using these particular arguments, some of the critics have still said that all the revenues which has been raised by government of India has not been used for good purposes only. That is, the quality of expenditure has been very weak. For example, government of India has provided a recapitalization package. Government of India has provided a package for reviving Air India. So when the Prime Minister himself in one of the election rallies stated that the government of India doesn't have any business to do business, why is that government of India providing these kind of expenditure or bailout packages? So these are some of the issues surrounding the criticism against the government of India in terms of handling this particular issue. So finally, what is a way forward? What steps or measures should be taken by the government to control the prices of petrol and diesel? I have given certain recommendations, but out of these recommendations, only one recommendation, that is reduction in the taxes, will provide the immediate relief to the households. All the other recommendations will provide a control or will control the prices of petrol and diesel in the long term. So let me start having the discussion. First one, the government of India has to reduce the dependence on the crude oil. This can be done by promoting electric vehicles. This can be done by promoting renewable energy sources. This can be done by importing huge amount of a shale oil from USA. Already for the first time, India has imported shale oil from USA. and USA is the major producing country or the highest producing country of shale oil. And since shale has been a very good competitor to the crude, especially a competitor to the pricing determined by the OPEC, India must leverage this, increase the imports of a shale oil from US. This will not only benefit India in controlling the prices in the domestic market, this will also promote cordial trade relations between India and US, thereby to a certain extent giving certain leveraging options for India. Second, create a stabilization fund on the lines of a fund which has been created in UK or Thailand, where whenever the crude oil prices will decrease in the international market, they will maintain certain reserves, or whatever the savings have been done because of that, they will put it in a fund. And these particular reserves will be used whenever the crude oil prices will shoot or will increase in the market, thereby stabilizing the prices in the domestic market. In case of India, right now we do not have this kind of a stabilization fund. Although it was discussed by Government of India back in the year 2005, we have not provided any kind of a stabilization fund. It's a very high time that we start setting up of a stabilization fund, but having said so, the critics have already said that we have already crossed the bridge. That is, the stabilization fund should have been created in the year 2014 when the crude oil prices started declining in the international market. But nevertheless, we need to look into the prospects or the proposal of a creation of a stabilization fund. Next one, reduce the taxes, and finally bring the fuel prices under GST. Let's have a detailed discussion related to these two issues. Now let's have a discussion related to reducing the taxes, which will provide the immediate relief to the households. But the question is, who should do it? Should the central government do it or should the states do it? The central government has already stated that it will not be reducing the excise, whereas some of the states have already reduced the taxes, that is Rajasthan, Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra have already taken the lead. But the question is, who is in a better position to do it? As already mentioned, the central government collects a fixed charge in the form of cesses on petrol and diesel, whereas the states collect in the form of ad valorem. Out of these two, the states are in a better position to reduce the tax rates. Why? Since the prices of petrol and diesel have kept on increasing, and since the states impose taxes in the form of percentage of VAT as represented in these two figures, basically with the price increases, if the percentage is reduced, the earnings will still remain the same or earnings can be maintained. Whereas if the central government reduces the charges, the fixed charges that it collects in the form of cesses, it will affect its earnings. On one side, subsidy bill will increase, import bill will increase, the fiscal deficit will increase, which will have a larger repercussions on the finances of government. The states are in a better position to reduce the taxes. Even this particular representation shows the same thing, wherein the states over a period of time have earned huge amount of revenues, not only directly by imposing the VAT on petrol and diesel, but also by getting part of the revenues earned by the central government. Why? Central government is implementing the recommendation of the 14th Finance Commission, under which 40% of the tax collected under the divisible pool of taxes will go to the state government. So it is said that for the financial year 2017 and 2018, the states collectively collected more than 3 lakh crore worth of the taxes on petrol as well as diesel, both by implementing the VAT and collecting it, and in the form of a devolution from the central government. So out of the two, that is the central government as well as the state government, the states are in a better position to reduce the VAT rates. But having said so, some of the states such as Kerala have already opposed this particular idea. The argument which is put forward by the states are, one, with introduction of the concept of a GST, the states have already given a huge amount of revenues or taxation powers to the GST council. As a result of this, their revenues have already taken a hit. And second, the states will also have their own fiscal deficit targets to meet. In this particular situation, the states are giving a statement that they will not be able to reduce the tax rates, rather the central government should reduce its own cess rates. So finally, what about bringing petrol as well as diesel under the GST? Will this provide any kind of a benefit to the consumer? Will the prices reduce? So on and so forth. Basically understand this. On September 3rd, these were the prices of petrol and diesel, and these were the components out of the total market prices charged per liter of petrol as well as diesel. Out of this, you can see that prices charged to dealers was 39 rupees. Excise duty as well as VAT was around 100% of this particular price, whereas the excise and state VAT on diesel was somewhere around 2/3 of this particular price. As already mentioned, the tax rate in case of a petrol is around 100% and the tax rate in case of diesel is around 67%. Now the issue is, right now under the ambit of GST, we have got 5 tariffs. 0%, 5%, 12%, 18%, 28%. The question is, under which tariff structure or under which tariff should petrol and diesel be brought in? If it has to be brought in, obviously everybody will look at the highest slab, that is 28%. But the problem is, if it is brought under 28%, both the central government as well as state government will suffer under recoveries. That is, they will not be able to generate revenues. How so? Let's have a look at it. One, it will have a huge impact on the finances of the central government. Why? Presently, the central government collects a huge amount of revenues. Now, with introduction of these under GST, central government at the maximum can earn only 14% on these particular prices, which is not acceptable to the central government. And second issue is, if petrol and diesel is brought under the ambit of GST, the government of India has to start providing input to tax credit. And since right now these are not under the ambit of a GST, no ITC is provided by the central government, and if they are brought under the ambit of GST, expectation is that the central government will end up losing revenues to the tune of around 20,000 crore rupees. So definitely the central government will not be happy with this particular situation. On the other side, states will also suffer. Why? They will get only 14% of these particular taxes, or out of 28%, the states will get only 14%. The states have already stated that they are vehemently opposed to the idea of bringing the petrol as well as diesel prices under the ambit of pure GST. That is the reason one of the recommendations which have been given by various experts and which has been followed in various countries is that no pure GST will be included, or no pure GST will be applicable for petrol as well as diesel. That is, in case of let's say petrol, the rates will be, if hypothetically, if it is brought under, the rates could be like this: 28%, that is GST plus VAT. The states will not only get 14% out of this, will also have the right to impose extra VAT and collect extra revenues as per their requirements. So basically, this is the discussion related to whether bringing petrol as well as diesel is feasible under the ambit of GST. So in conclusion, we can say that the decision to roll back the central excise or the state VAT is not so easy. Why? The prices of petrol as well as diesel, which are very volatile in the present situation, are not determined by these particular taxes. Rather, these are getting determined by various external factors on which neither the state government nor the central government has got any control. And if central government buckles under pressure and keeps in mind the next year elections as well as state elections this year and rolls back some of the increase in the excise duties, this will have a large scale repercussions on increasing fiscal deficit. As already Moody's has stated that it is very doubtful that India will be able to achieve fiscal deficit target for the financial year 2019. On one side, the current account deficit is very high, and on the other side, even if the fiscal deficit increases, then the twin deficit issue which India faced in the year 2013 and 2014 will come back to haunt Indian economy again. So the government of India as of now is trying to follow the concept of a good economics over good politics, and it better continue with the same situation. And naturally, in case of an open economy or in case of an open market, the market has to determine the prices, not the government. Thank you.